Welcome back to Whatever Next, our podcast, and this is episode 2. This episode we'll be talking about our origin stories, backgrounds, a little bit more of who we are and how we grew up with our different family dynamics. For us, this is kind of a funny episode because we already know so much about each other, but we're going to go back and kind of re-experience what it was like when we first met each other, so you guys can get to know us as well.
I think that intro sounded really good.
Yeah? How did you like that? Where should we start?
Wait, so we all met over, through Facebook? Mm-hmm. Maybe we should describe that.
Yeah, so we all met through Facebook, an online Facebook group for Asian adoptees who are currently living in the UK. I had just come over to Edinburgh to be with Rowan, and I didn't know any other Asian adoptees in Edinburgh. I just knew his friends that had already lived there. So I posted on the Facebook group, hey, is anybody out here? And Hannah and Josephine were the first 2 people to comment on the post, and they were actually the first 2 people that I met in person as well. I think I met you first in the Hideaway Cafe.
Oh, yeah. I think, because when I replied to your Facebook post, I was like, I don't know anyone here in Scotland. And then Joe replied saying, I'm here as well. But yeah, oh gosh, I'm going to have to look at our messages now. It's so long ago.
We ended up talking for 3 hours at the cafe, didn't we?
I know. So we had that, and then we also...
and then I met you, Joe, in a cafe, or in a bakery downtown.
Yeah,
I remember what it was called.
Was it? It's the one opposite the station, isn't it? And they gave us scones at the end because you were about to hop on the train.
Was it Salt Cafe or Salt Rock or something?
No, that was another time. We've been to a lot of cafes.
We've been to a lot of cafes. And then when did you 2 meet in person for the first time?
I feel like we all met as a 3,
Cafe Nero, didn't we?
Was it? Oh, potentially, yeah. Was I mid-shift? Or no?
Yeah, and then your friend gave you your scarf for your birthday.
Yeah.
I think when I first met you guys, I was more curious on, what your parents were like, or how you grew up, or how much diversity you grew up around, or if you knew any other adoptees growing up. Because I feel like there aren't as many in Scotland compared to the US, but...
Yeah, because it was interesting for me at least hearing how you kind of grown up with them, and also listening to your interview with Rowan and how he was saying that you kind of collect adoptees wherever you go in the world. Like a little magnet.
I collect them. They're my souvenirs.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah. But yeah, I love meeting other adoptees wherever I go traveling. It's so cool.
Yeah. Also, because, you've got 2 sisters as well who are also adopted. So it's really been kind of part of your life, through and through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my sister, Lena, she is the middle one. And she was adopted from Vietnam when she was 2 months old. And then we have another younger sister, Nora, who is adopted from China, a different province, when she was 2.5 years old, when I was 8 months. But yeah, we all grew up together with our moms in Kansas City. I don't like the way I said that. It sounds weird.
Do it again.
No. We can cut that part out. But
how did your mums tell you that they were going to adopt again? Was it just whoop, we've got another kid, or?
For Lena, I think I was really young when we adopted her because we're only 3 years apart. So I think I was only 4. So I don't really remember her, but they probably were just you're going to be a big sister, and then showed me her baby pictures, and then kind of told me how Mama Lisa was going to go travel over to Vietnam and then bring her back, and she would be a part of the family. For Nora, I do remember them being do you want another younger sister? And I remember being oh my God, this house is already chaotic, but sure, why not? And this was after, because I have a vague memory of them doing this again before Nora with a baby. I don't remember what her name was, but she was going to be domestically adopted from Chicago, and it fell through. But I just remember them showing me her baby picture and being where this might be your next younger sister. And then nothing happened. And then Nora came along.
Do you remember how you felt about that?
I think I just felt confused because I don't think they sat me down or anything and said what happened, because I still don't really know what happened. But I think that the birth mother had changed her mind last minute. Yeah, and they were really heartbroken. But because I think they had the baby for a week already, and then she changed her mind. But yeah, I don't know much more about it. But Nora, she came when I was probably, because we're 6 years apart, when I was almost 10, 9 or 10. And it was a different transition because she was a bit older when she was adopted. So she came over speaking a little bit of Mandarin.
And she doesn't remember any of the Mandarin now?
No, she took up Chinese classes in high school and she got really good at it, but she just kind of stopped after a while. Yeah. Okay. She might go back to it. I don't know.
And do your mums both come from big families? I mean, do they both kind of want to have lots of kids? Like, that's why they adopted 3, or is it just kind of one of those things that just snowballed?
Probably, yeah, because my mom, Lisa, she grew up with 5 other siblings, and then my mom, Bev, she grew up with 6 other siblings. So they both came from pretty big families. So I have lots of cousins on both sides of the families. So that's probably why, yeah. I think that they just liked growing up with other kids and wanted us to have the same. I remember my mom always saying, like, to us, like, if you ever have kids, never have 3 because one's always going to be left out. I'm like, that's what you did. That's what you did to us. And they were like, yeah, but once we got 3, we couldn't have 4. It was too much. Too many.
The middle child complex is real.
Yeah. But I'm glad we had each other. It was fun. It was fun growing up, even though we fought a lot. We always had each other to play with.
And like, I remember you talking in some of the previous interviews, and also the one with Mama Lisa, about how they had to navigate and play the American adoptive system to allow them to adopt, and that she had to go and adopt as like a single parent on paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was crazy because, yeah, they couldn't legally adopt as a gay couple, and they couldn't marry each other as a couple in the U.S. either. So Lisa had to file everything herself as a single parent and jump through a few hoops with the social workers, saying that my mom, Bev, was just a roommate, even though they were obviously a couple. And yeah, that's kind of how like we lived our life for the majority of my life, with schools and everything, and like being able to get financial aid from schools because on paper she was a single mom with 3 kids rather than a couple with 2 incomes. But let's play one of the clips that she kind of describes how she worked with the social worker on adoptions. Let's see. And what were the legal loopholes that you had to jump through as a gay parent adopting from China?
I think the biggest loophole was the way the home study had to be written, that we were roommates, that, you know, my Bev traveled a lot for work and we shared a house. Not that there couldn't be any reference to us being a couple or anything like that. So we had to have a home study person that was willing to basically lie for us.
How did you know they were willing to lie for you?
Well, because we had the reference for her from other gay couples who had used her.
Oh.
And so at that point, there wasn't a lot of pressure on her from the agencies. They were kind of willing to look the other way or not do much investigation into it. But when we were able to use her for your adoption and for Lena's adoption, but then when Nora's adoption came around, she told us that she wouldn't be able to do that anymore, that she was fearful for her license, that she wouldn't be able to do it. But luckily through Mal and Kim, we found Chris, who was like, well, I have no problem with it. So you're roommates, right? Yeah. And so we used her for the 3rd adoption.
What do you guys think when you listen to this as like outsiders?
I think it's crazy, the hoops and the effort that they had to put in just to have a child as a gay couple looking to adopt, and that it's just, to me, it's like crazy. I mean, obviously, yes, there should be checks and balances in place to make sure that people just can't adopt on a whim, but that it was such an elaborate process, and a drunk heterosexual couple can make a baby in 30 seconds of stupidity.
Yeah. Hannah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really sad just to hear that how many extra hurdles they had to do and basically lie on people and not have to. They can't go the normal way. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird because I never really thought about, or you never really think about, legal processes that any kind of parent has to go through and like the time frame leading up to the adoption that they have to go through before they meet their kid. Yeah, I never really thought about what they had to go through until I got older, really. But I guess another thing that kind of blew my mind when I was learning more about it or thinking more about it was that another hoop that they had to like kind of jump through, I guess, was that I learned that in the US, if you are a married couple and one of the spouses takes on like federal disability or has to go on to, I think, Social Security earlier than they intended, which happened to one of my moms, then the government stipends like a monthly stipend for each kid that you have to support raising them until they're like 18. But because they were a gay couple, they weren't technically married. And so we never got the financial backing from the government because one of the parents went on disability and couldn't work.
Oh.
Yeah, and I didn't know that until like last year or 2 years ago. So I know I'm like thinking about it and it's just so crazy. And so my mom, Lisa, had to work 2 jobs for like my whole life growing up.
Jeez.
I know, but not to make it into like a sad story or anything, but it's just, another loophole or thing that being gay kind of stopped them from being able to live their life the way that they wanted to.
When did you start talking about this with your mum?
It was when I was doing one of my online classes and it was a political science class and I was learning about all of the different like benefits and systems for disability and like Social Security. And so I was like reading all of the policies and stuff. And then I was like, wait, this one applies to, this was my family, but not actually because they weren't a heterosexual like married couple on paper. And that's when it kind of clicked in my mind. And then I asked my mom about it and she was like, yeah, I try not to think about it.
Has it changed since they adopted you three or has it stayed the same?
I assume it's changed now that gay marriage is legal in the States.
But good that they had that network of, because your cohort at school was actually quite full of other East Asian adoptees and with gay parents as well, that they kind of like carved out this little kind of friendship group.
Yeah, I don't know how they've all found each other, but they all seem to be friends with many of the other gay couples who had adopted kids from China or Vietnam were connected in Kansas City. So I do have like a handful of other adoptee friends who grew up with the same family dynamics as I did. Yeah, I feel really lucky in that aspect. That I wasn't only surrounded by other adoptees, but also other adoptees whose family looked like mine.
Yeah, of course. And you went to those adoptee camps as well. So Hannah and I have been camp counselors this year. It's something that I feel was somewhat similar, but I mean, it was virtual. But you attended these ones in person every year.
Mm-hmm. We started going to them when I was probably like 7, I think. And we did go to one for Chinese adoptees and their families in Maine one year, I think, before we went to the Found Catalyst. And I guess my mom didn't really like it as much, or it was more expensive. So we ended up going to Catalyst every year growing up. And so growing up, we were connected with other families who adopted babies from Vietnam, and we kind of stayed connected until we reunited again in the summer every year.
How was that? Is that something that you think helped?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I realized how important it was until I got older, because even though I attended like all the camps and my sisters did too, like there was like kind of a subtle, not resentment, but like apprehension of speaking about adoption when we were all together, because that's kind of the purpose of like the conference and the camp. But I think we were more involved with just getting to know each other as people And then now that we're older, we still have each other to go back and be like, hey, this whole adoption thing, what do you think about it? Now that we're adults. And I think everybody who attended the camp as kids, are grateful to have just like that community to always go back to.
I mean, Hannah and I went to a kind of English equivalent called CAP, which was down in Mayfield. But Hannah, how did you find that? Because that was like this weird phenomenon. It was once a year, this tiny little village just had this influx of like Chinese adoptees.
I know, it's so bizarre. I can't believe we were there at the same time. But yeah, I think because my parents went through this adoption charity or agency or something, and they were kept on this list, and through that they got in contact with someone who was running the Chinese summer school, and I think through there, I'm not 100% sure, but they just enrolled me on that, and then I went to that for I think 5 years or something, 5 or 6 years.
You've got to find a picture of both of us in it.
Oh yeah. How did your parents find it?
I think they enjoyed it. But I mean, I think they slightly felt the same way. I always felt kind of, I know, it was never really addressed, adoption, that is. It was just kind of, we were all there and we'd do stuff like we'd make dumplings, or we'd like do a dance to Mulan, I'll Make a Man Out of You, which again I think is quite a poor choice of song. But I always kind of resented the idea that just because we were all adopted, that meant we get on. And I think my parents did as well. They're like, we've all adopted children from China, yes, but that doesn't mean we have anything else in common. And obviously children are a big part of your lives, and that is a talking point. But beyond that, I think they kind of struggled to find friendships within that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you kept in touch with anyone from your year or the summer school?
Yeah, I have. But I'm not like that close with them. Like, I appreciate them as people, but they're not. I mean, some people, no, like they're not my closest friends or anything.
How many families were involved with that?
It just grew and grew. I remember by the end there were loads and loads of kids there. But at the start it was maybe like 30 families. But did you think it helped to go into those camps, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, because I was there from when I was 5 upwards, that I was just a kid and just thinking, okay, well, I'll try and make friends and play, and it was nice making dumplings and getting to eat them. But I don't know, it's really bizarre because it was, how long was it? A week or 2 weeks or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a week.
Was it 3 weeks? 2 weeks? Anyway. And yeah, you were just sort of thrown in there, and then once you made friends or kept in touch, and then you sort of all left, and then it was like, okay, well, that was the end of it. But I thought it was like a fun activity, but not really getting the meaning of it that much, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, looking at Catch and what we did there, and kind of looking at what we've been doing with this online camp, I mean, what are the kind of main differences? And like, do you think that one approach is more beneficial than the other in terms of like talking to kids about adoption? Is that something that you wish we'd had more of or less of? Or?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously as a camp counsellor, you can see sort of more of the benefits rather than, I don't know if you were in position of the child now or back then, but I really like how, can I say the name?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. I really like how...
Unless we're going to slag them off, we should.
Yeah. Send the website. This is the one that I don't like.
Yeah, I really like the exercises, and they introduce adoption really gently and think about, okay, well, there was an activity we had to do, and it was an outline of a person, and write words on the outside of how people sort of saw you, or how people, and then the inside is how you saw yourself, and look at the differences. And I think that is a great way of gradually incorporating your adoptive identity and racial identity and other sorts of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know, what did you think, Jo?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't know, I think it's slightly different. I don't know, I think Americans, they've got the vocabulary in a slightly different way that we don't have. That's like, I got the sense of the kids, like they were a lot more used to talking about themselves kind of in a reflective way. And maybe this could just be me as well, but I don't know if I would have been as receptive to something like that as a kid. But again, that could just be a personal thing. But I think it was beneficial for the kids, and it was really lovely to see how they kind of like opened up, especially after like 4 days of it.
Mm. Yeah, it was really lovely seeing them progress, well, not progress, but just, like you said, open up and share about it with strangers, but not really strangers, friends. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's true though. Like, I feel like there's a fine line into pushing it onto kids, of like being like, you should talk about this, and kind of just letting them connect with each other on an, I don't know, more with their own autonomy of like, okay, I'll connect with this person, or like, I don't really like that person. And because I think that's really true. And I remember the first time I met you, Joe, one of the first things you said was like, just because we're adoptees, we're like whoever we meet up with, and doesn't mean that we're going to connect with each other or become friends. And
just now, what a bitch.
and I don't know, I just thought that was so like true as well, because you can't really expect to be friends with somebody just because you're both adopted. And like, I definitely have experienced that, and like, and within the camp too, like, you know, not everybody gets along, and you do have like the smaller circles of friend groups as well, just like in any kind of other social setting. But yeah, I think that is something to keep in mind, that like, just because you meet another person who's adopted doesn't mean you're going to be best friends with them. I think it takes, I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but with kids, though, I don't really know how they plan like the activities at Catalyst and stuff, but there was the ones that they talk about racial identities and experiences with racism with the kids. I have been really surprised at how receptive they are, even though they act like they don't want to be a part of it. And that kind of really moves me, because it shows me that kids really do need that connection, or at least like shared experience, and realize that they're not by themselves when they experience something like that. Like, there was this one where they all had a piece of paper, and they had to write down all of like the weird phrases or weird sayings or questions that people have asked them. And these are kids probably like, I don't know, like, I never know how old kids are just by looking at them. But probably like 9 to like 13, 14. And so they had their piece of paper, had to write down all of the, just negative things or things that made them feel uncomfortable about their race or adoption. And kids would just, fill up the page and like even draw like little illustrations to go along with it. And then without having to share outright, the leader of the group would be like, who has one that relates to like their eyes or their adoption? And like, they would all raise their hand and then look around the room and see how many other people have experienced that. And I don't know. To me, that kind of stuff I feel like is important. Even if they don't all become friends with each other, they can all see that.
Yeah, they're not on their own.
Yeah.
Sharing experiences and things.
Yeah. I think it was sad. The one thing that really stuck with me was we had that exercise that Hannah was talking about, and hearing like these really quite young kids talk about race, and it was just, I don't know, that they were kind of so aware of that there was this one kid that I think she was in a foster family with like some other, there was like 5 or 6 of them, but she already could tell that she was having a different experience and experiencing the world in a different way. And she was saying, you know, as a black kid, like these things had happened to her, and that was really gutting. I think she was only 11 or 12 as well.
Yeah, they're so young.
Yeah.
Do you remember ever speaking about race and experiences with racism as a kid with your parents?
No, I don't think so. I think it really took 2020 for them to be like, oh shit, Joe's not like us. Although, no, I do remember, and like, bless Judy, this bit might have to get cut, but like, we were coming back from, what are you doing, buddy? Oh, we're coming back from my sister's wedding, and we were going through passport control, and like, you know, you have those like intelligent ones with like the little chip in it, and if you have that, you can go through fast lane, but I think you have to be 18 to do it. And I looked rough after a 12-hour flight, and so the guy stopped me, and he was a person of colour himself, but Judy, I think she also was slightly sleep deprived, hadn't had the best flight, and she thought it was like some racist attack. And so she goes over to him, she's like, my daughter is a British citizen. And he was just like, okay. This poor guy who'd just been assigned to like direct the flow was just getting this earful from Mum and Jay.
It was her time to shine.
It was. She was like, right, I'm going to solve racism. One flight attendant at a time.
A for effort, Judy. That's so funny. What about you, Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, actually similar to Joe's, but with the airport. I think this was in the first episode when it was quote, only until so after my parents collected me from China and flew back, and then at immigrations, I think that was when they sort of realised that they had an alien, what they say, a Chinese baby, and then we haven't talked about race until, again, similar to Joe's, I think 2020 or something, when they're like, oh yeah, and they're like reading books about race, I think it was Native or something, and just, I think being shocked after the BLM movement and everything, and that really sort of opened up their minds, and we can talk about it more openly, which I really appreciate. This was the first chat with my mum, proper chat with my mum about adoption, and I think one of the first interviews that went onto the Whatever Next website, so check that out under Coffee Chats. Yeah, this is just us. Why did you choose to adopt?
Because Michael and I wanted a family, and we were unable and unsuccessful, and we tried IVF twice, and we decided that life without a child in our life would be very empty, and the adoption came about because we were in our 40s. We were too old to adopt a young baby in the UK. And once you were over 37, you were thought of as old. And we wanted a child as young as possible, because we didn't want them to have been through numerous foster homes or have had lots of bad experiences. And about this time, there was a lot of publicity about the little girls in China, and there was a television program, and there was various articles called "The Dying Rooms of China," and I was district nursing, and one of my colleagues gave me the article in Marie Claire magazine, and I read it, and it was a bit like, what do they call it, a light bulb moment. I thought, this is it. We can adopt and offer a home to a little child, and so we would have a little child, and a little child could have parents. So that's how it came about.
So why don't you just explain quickly, because you grew up in South England.
Yeah. Dorset.
Dorset.
What was it called?
That little place that you never
Tell
mentioned.
us about Dorset,
ever.
Hannah.
Yeah, Dorset is a lovely green area with lots of cows and sheep. It's on the south coast, so you've got the south... Okay, this is important. But, yeah, so I lived in Dorset between... I was adopted until age 5, and then my childhood was really in East Sussex, where I lived there from being 5 to 13, and then we moved back down to Dorset when I was 14. So just like back and forth.
What was that like growing up in Dorset / East Sussex?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've discussed this before about diversity and predominantly white areas. I think it's like probably an average of 90% white, if probably more. But yeah, I don't know. I had a really happy childhood, and I'm really thankful for that. And nothing really crossed my mind about really being adopted or being Chinese or anything. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else you need to know.
So your mum was a nurse and your dad was a teacher?
Yes, yeah.
And you grew up as an only child?
Oh yeah, I was an only child. I am an only child. And so yeah, I just got used to making myself entertained somehow.
Rubik's Cubes?
Yeah, and that.
Were you close with your parents growing up?
Yeah, I was close with my parents. Yeah, I had a really fun childhood, and my parents were always there for me.
Never got angry with you, apparently.
What?
Never got angry with you, apparently.
Oh, apparently they're going to be listening and they're like, what? No,
No, share the
Remember
story
this
of when
account?
they
Sally, if
was
you're
the-
listening, please tell us.
you were stomping up the stairs.
Oh, she'll probably bring up some cringy old anecdotes, or I don't know, some.
Were there any times where you had kind of awkward encounters with your parents out and about because of being adopted or because of being a different race from them?
Probably, but I think that it just went over both of our heads, or all of our heads.
As a family.
Yeah. They're like, oh, what is this? And it's like, yeah, and I think I asked my parents, well, my mum this anyway, do you experience this? And I don't think any of us really clocked that, but it was only until I think when I went to Eastbourne for sixth form and stuff, when I sort of got more sort of microaggressions and sort of racism, etc. And so it was sort of after that, and then coming to uni as well, that where I sort of acknowledged, or where I was more aware of that, and then I was like, oh, okay, and then looking back at sort of, there have probably been instances, yeah. But Joe, how was your childhood? How would you describe it?
Very average. No, not like average in a bad way. Like, I don't know. It was very unremarkable. It was very nice. I grew up in London. We were in Rotherhithe, and then we moved to North London when I was 4 or 5. For my school. Then I came up to Edinburgh for uni, and here I still am.
How would you describe North London?
Oof.
For people who don't really know the different districts, I guess.
North London is, well, the part of North London that we grew up in. I say we, me, myself and I. It's just like, I feel like you should cut all these clips together, me just thinking.
Have that image of you and Hester on the windowsill with your pensive face.
North London. Well, I grew up in Camden, but we're in a slightly weird thing where like we straddle a couple of different boundaries. So we're kind of Hampstead, kind of Kilburn, kind of St John's Wood, but also Swiss Cottage, which makes no sense for anyone who doesn't know it. But it can be quite insular. It can be quite bitchy. I mean, I also grew up in a fairly affluent kind of middle class environment, so it can be very superficial and judgmental. And I said bitchy, didn't I?
When did you start becoming more aware of like how the social environment was in North London?
I think because I went to first a private girls' school and then a private co-ed school, and I think the acknowledgement and awareness of privilege it kind of came into effect when we were about kind of 13, 14-ish, but in a very kind of loose understanding of what it meant to be privileged, in that it was something that people would joke about, and they're like, oh, like, material goods they're very disposable, but also sought after. And I think it took kind of coming to uni and meeting different people to realise that this isn't necessarily a healthy aspect to take the world with. I don't know. I lived in a pretty sheltered bubble, I think, up until uni, and still do to a certain extent as well.
And both of your parents are journalists?
Yes. Yeah, they met on the Sunday Times. They're now retired ex-journalists, but yeah, they were both journalists back in the day.
Were you close with them growing up, or how would you describe your relationship with your mom and dad?
Yeah, we were very close. It was just kind of the three of us, and then we got the dog, and the dog made 4.
Oh.
Yeah.
How would you describe your experience of like meeting adoptees through Catch, and then when you were like a teenager, and then like how it is now in your 20s?
I think I was fairly resistant to the idea of meeting adoptees and engaging with being Chinese and being adopted up until now, really. I mean, because I went to Catch for a good while. And I also I was an assistant and like team leader for a couple of years.
You were team leader?
Yeah, I was.
Oh.
Yeah. And a Mandarin assistant, art assistant. It kind of felt like going through the motions, I think. And I did have friends then. I do like them, but we're not outrageously close or anything. It's just, yeah, it's what it is.
Have you shown them Leaf Boy yet?
I have not. That's on the to-do list. But I think I've met other adoptees more organically in the last few years, and I think that's been a nicer way to build a friendship because it doesn't feel as forced. And it's, we can bond over separate aspects of our lives. And then that kind of, the adoption thing it follows through, and it's nice to be able to talk to them about kind of aspects of it, but it's not the kind of bedrock, I suppose.
And what's it like for you, Hannah, meeting older adult adoptees now in your 20s as well?
Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, I managed to meet you two. I think you were both sort of the first adult adoptees that I've really talked to properly about adoption. And when you were asking earlier about what it was like meeting you for the first time, I think I was just super excited that we could just talk about adoption, and not just that, but I know, exploring that part, which I hadn't really before. I had listened to a few podcasts and other things, not by a Chinese adoptee, but by an adoptee. And so it was cool listening to that, but I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I think having this platform and having this podcast, that it's been really rewarding in that sense, that we can have these discussions.
What is the clip from your parents or your mom that you wanted to play, and how or why she wanted to adopt?
Yes. What made you consider adoption in the first place?
Well, it was very simple. We tried to have our own birth children, but failed, mainly because I was 43 when Daddy and I got together. And I had a couple of miscarriages. Then we had some fertility treatment, and that didn't work. And we went to see this lovely man called Howard Jacobs. And he's a doctor. And he just said, rather than go through all this, have you considered adoption? If you have a will to parent, adoption is just as good as having your own children.
What was your first reaction when you heard that?
I kind of agreed with it, because I'd been thinking about adoption for quite a while, and Daddy hadn't been so keen, and he liked the idea of reproducing his own genes. I wasn't that keen on reproducing my own genes, because there were quite a lot of flaws in my own genes, and so I actually liked the idea of adopting.
What did you think of hearing your mom talk about all of the fertility treatments and miscarriages that she had to go through before she came to adoption?
It's something, that she hasn't spoken about that much. I don't think I know it wasn't a very nice experience for obvious reasons. So it's a lot to put your body through, and it's a lot to put yourself through mentally as well. That kind of continual hope and expectation and disappointment. Part of the reason that, we were talking about this the other day, that, we wanted to start Whatever Next and have these conversations about adoption, is that it's not this kind of last resort in the same way that I think it was for my parents, that they exhausted those other options of IVF and surrogacy, and then they're like, okay, now we'll adopt. I think people it's higher up on the list. It isn't this kind of like, oh, I guess thing. And I think it's important people think about some of, the things that come with it.
For prospective adoptive parents and all of the parents who come to adoption and whatever path or past experience they've had, and when we're starting to do more webinars that include adoptive parents and everything, what kind of thoughts and ideas come to mind when we are given the opportunity to speak to them? What do you want them to know?
I think one of the things that really stood out for me for my mum's interview, and I think that's the clip that got played in the episode before about relationships and dating, but we were talking about how she felt going back to China and finding a birth family, and some of the reservations that she had, and she was talking about that removal of ego, that she had this moment where she was like, I had to step back and not take myself out of the equation, but realize that this isn't about me. And I think that's something that people can struggle to do, and it's also something that people don't like to hear either, if you're going to try and talk to an adoptive parent. And I think I've also been doing some of the parent groups with the online adoptee camp, and a lot of them are kind of like, why isn't my child talking to me about this? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they responding in a certain way? And it's that thing that people process things differently, A, and B, they don't owe you that kind of immediate explanation about how their day is and how they feel about adoption, because there's a chance that they haven't got that yet. I know. What do you think, Hannah?
That was a really good answer. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I think it's important for adoptive parents to know, even though they're adopting, if they adopt an infant, that they're not necessarily adopting a blank slate of a human. They come with their own background and experience that maybe nobody knows about, but it won't resurface until later in life. And then when it does, it doesn't mean that it can be erased or disregarded as unimportant to that individual. And that I think that a lot of adoptive parents should go into it as removing themselves, so removing their own ego from like that equation, or that their own adoptive or adoptees' history that they don't know about, or that they're on a journey learning about.
If you have any further questions or queries, you can email us at whatevernext2020@gmail.com.
Hi there, thanks for listening. Whatever Next has chosen to help support Rape Crisis Scotland because of all the work that they do to help end sexual violence. They work with 17 independent local rape crisis centres spread across Scotland, as well as running a national helpline year-round to support anyone affected by sexual violence. They also work with schools to help teach consent and safe sex, and campaign to change legislation and attitudes that allow sexual violence and those who practice it to prevail. It goes without saying that ending sexual violence is a matter that each of us take very seriously, and that's why we've decided to donate the profit raised from some of the stickers that we're selling to Rape Crisis Scotland. If you want to head over to our website, they're on sale, and also through our Instagram if you just want to DM us. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Whatever Next. You can find more of our episodes on Acast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. With thanks to Matt Ramsey for editing and mixing this episode, Whatever Next is produced by Sola Sounds.